Galw'r Cynulliad Cenedlaethol.
I call the National Assembly to order, and before starting on this afternoon's agenda, I would like to welcome the parliamentary delegation from Basra, Iraq, who are visiting the National Assembly today and who are in the public gallery this afternoon. Welcome. The first item on our agenda are questions to the First Minister. The first question, Mark Isherwood.
Is the Welsh Government assisting disabled people in Wales?
Yes, our framework for action on independent living sets out our plans to assist disabled people in Wales. We'll work together with disabled people and public sector bodies across Wales to refresh the framework this year.
Well, further to the Welsh Government announcement, it was transferring the Welsh Independent Living Grant to local authorities. Campaigner in Wrexham, Nathan Davies, who actually presented a certificate to it, the Enabling Wales North Wales graduation last month, expressed concern that they felt that disabled people had been, quote, sold down the river and all they could see was yet more fighting. And Disability Wales expressed disappointment that the Welsh Government didn't follow Scotland in setting up an independent living fund administered by Inclusion Scotland, which Northern Ireland has also commissioned its ILF from. How, therefore, will you engage with such concerns to ensure that not only local authorities and health boards, but the Welsh Government itself is complying with the intention of the Social Services Wellbeing Act, placing a duty on public authorities to promote the involvement of people in the design and delivery of care and support services?
Well, the decision was taken to enable payments to be made uninterrupted to former recipients in Wales. It was an interim decision designed to last until the 31st of March this year, while we consider which arrangements were appropriate to provide support in the longer term. And following advice from the Stakeholders Advisory Group, which does include organisations which represent disabled people in Wales, we are introducing from this April a 2-year transitional arrangement whereby support in the future will be through normal social care provision.
Mike Hedges.
Presiding Officer, I want to highlight the importance of sign language to the deaf community. For many deaf people, it is a major method of communication. I perhaps declare an interest, my sister is profoundly deaf. Will the First Minister join me in supporting the creation of GCSE First Language Sign Language and to be treated as the equivalent of First Language Welsh and English at GCSE?
Well, it's a matter ultimately for Qualifications Wales. They are responsible for the development and approval of qualifications in Wales. That said, I think it is important, and I take very much on board what the member has said, that it's important to promote British Sign Language and also to promote the availability of qualifications in British Sign Language. It is a matter I will take up on his behalf with Qualifications Wales.
Sian Gwenllian.
There's been a great deal of talk that there's a possibility that the attendance allowance is to be devolved to Wales from Westminster. Some 100,000 people in Wales receive this benefit at a cost of some £400 million per annum. Now, if these benefits are devolved to Wales, we will then have to decide what the role of local authorities will be. And Plaid Cymru, of course, always welcomes additional powers residing here in Wales for the benefit of the people of Wales, but there are concerns that this move is a money-saving mechanism ultimately. So how can you ensure that older disabled people in Wales won't lose out if this change were to occur?
Well, there is an unfortunate history in this place where benefits have been devolved, but without all the funding to follow. And that happened with the council tax benefit. So I'm not in favour of receiving any powers without funding, and also I'm not in favour of getting the full funding if following on that. And so if that was offered to us, we would never wish to take any new powers without the funding to follow and without the assurance in the long term about the source of that funding.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, in March last year, as part of the Getting Ahead 2 programme, Learning Disability Wales were given £10 million over 5 years to transform the lives of over 1,000 young people aged 16 to 25 who have a learning disability or learning difficulty, and that is through undertaking a paid work placement lasting between 6 and 12 months. What does this commitment demonstrate about the Welsh Government's determination to assist people with disabilities in Wales, and how is this actively helping to change people's lives?
Well, we can see the results for ourselves, and I can say that we are working with our Learning Disability Advisory Group to develop a Learning Disability Strategic Action Plan that will go out to wide consultation later this year in order to build on the good work that's already been put in place.
Cwestiwn 2, Paul Davies.
Question 2, Paul Davies. Will the First Minister outline what the Welsh Government is doing to support farmers in Pembrokeshire?
The Welsh Government is working to support the farming industry in Pembrokeshire, as in all parts of Wales.
First Minister, as I'm sure you're aware, a number of farmers in my constituencies are hugely concerned about the possibility of the introduction of nitrate vulnerable zones, which will have huge impact on their businesses and on the rural economy more generally. Your government's consultation has now been concluded, so can you tell us when you will take a decision on this issue? And in the meantime, can I urge you to look at this issue again and to consider introducing a voluntary approach to improve the water quality, because that's the way to support our farmers, by working with them rather than introducing burdensome regulation?
Well, the responses to the consultation will be considered in detail over the ensuing weeks, and of course there will be a discussion with the agricultural industry over those weeks as part of the review that's taken place.
Diolch, Llywydd. Wel, be newch...
Thank you, Llywydd. What will you do now to protect farmers in Pembrokeshire and the length and breadth of Wales, now that the Prime Minister in Westminster, Theresa May, has decided that we are going to be out with the single market, that there will be tariffs under the WTO rules on Welsh produce, that there is to be a free trade market with New Zealand where lamb can come in and undermine the quality produce of Wales? So what will you as government do now to protect the interest of Wales in the face of a decision taken by the Conservatives in Westminster to make farmers in Wales poorer and less able to compete?
May I say I am completely against tariffs on Welsh produce in any market, and I'm against any free market agreement that will weaken the agriculture of Wales, whether it be New Zealand or perhaps with Brazil on beef. And we have to be extremely careful as regards which countries agreements are made with. May I also say that there is a major problem as regards the fact that there is no assurance whatsoever that any penny would be available for the farmers of Wales post 2020, because of the fact that there has been no assurance given as regards subsidies themselves. Some people in DEFRA say that there won't be any payments at all for farming throughout the whole of the UK, and so the farmers will have to deal with the situation without any payments at all in a very short time. I am completely against any route that would mean that farmers of Wales would lose their money and their markets.
I now call on the party leaders to question the First Minister. Leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Andrew Arty-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, last October, one of the most passionate debates was held within this chamber, and the chamber upstairs was full up of people with an interest in the autism community and wanting to see legislation brought forward from your government. And we were led to believe there was a consensus around this in the Assembly election, that all the political parties believed that there should be an autism bill brought before the Assembly to improve rights for all people who suffer with autism. Yesterday, you brought forward your trade union bill. Many people will find it difficult to comprehend why you are standing in the way of bringing forward an autism bill that could greatly improve access to services and give a legal right for people who have a diagnosis of autism over the trade union bill that you've decided to bring forward. Why have you prioritised the trade union bill against people with autism?
Because well, there are two reasons. First of all, we want to protect workers' rights. His party want to remove competence from this Assembly over employment rights and regulations. It's his party's fault. We wouldn't have to bring this forward in the speed that we're having to take it if it wasn't for the Wales bill. So he can't sit there and try and claim it's nothing to do with him. And we will stand up for workers' rights as his party presses down on them. And that's why we will introduce a trade union bill to this chamber. We will look for support from this Assembly to protect the rights of workers, and let's see what happens if the competence changes. But we will stand up for Welsh workers even as his party tramples all over them.
I believe it's the Conservative Party which are delivering for Welsh workers as they are for UK workers. By delivering an economy that has delivered record rates of employment and opportunity and prosperity. But I noticed you did not dwell on the reasoning why your government stood in the way of delivering an autism bill as opposed to the trade union bill, where people upstairs after this debate were genuinely in tears and disgusted with the outcome from this Labour government over the betrayal, as they saw it, of your government's commitment in the Assembly election vis-à-vis the words that were spoken in this chamber in that debate. And what is unreasonable? What is unreasonable in the trade union bill about informing employers when strike action is going to be taken? What is unreasonable about seeking a threshold to get a majority of people who participate in that strike action? There is nothing unreasonable about that. It is your party that has taken us back to the 70s and moving away from empowering workers to get on in this country. So what is unreasonable in that trade union bill that demands that your government bring forward a separate piece of legislation? It is odious that the leader of the Welsh Conservatives tries to use people who are dealing with young people with autism and using that as a way to attack workers in Wales and the rest of Britain. The reality is that unemployment is lower in Wales than it is in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland because of the actions of the Welsh government. He talks about a threshold. I don't remember him arguing for the threshold in the Brexit referendum. Do you remember that? No, I don't remember that at all. Thresholds weren't important at that stage. I don't believe in thresholds. I didn't believe in a threshold for the Brexit referendum. I don't believe in a threshold as far as strike action balloting is concerned. What I believe in is that we stand up for the rights of workers in Wales despite what is being imposed on them by a hostile Tory government. 50 of his own MPs were calling for strikes to be banned in the public sector. What, you're going to arrest strikers now, are you? Going back to the 70s, he'd take us back to the 30s. You definitely want beer and sandwiches back in Cathays Park, don't you, First Minister? The people you are repaying are the Union General Secretaries who have funded Labour to the tune of £11 million since Jeremy Corbyn became leader. And I challenged you to bring forward that autism bill, which people were genuinely asking for. I have not heard people calling for a trade union bill here in Wales because they feel they're discriminated against. The real danger is that you will be trailblazing regional pay by bringing this bill forward, because you will be lowering the threshold for strike action here in Wales vis-à-vis other parts of the United Kingdom, and most times when strike action is taken is around terms and conditions and pay. So you will be the trailblazer for regional pay if you continue to push this trade union bill through the Assembly. But equally, you should apologise to the people in the autism community who feel they've been let down by you and your legislative programme. It is odious, I use that word again, to suggest that those people who are dealing with autism and who are dealing and caring for those people with autism should be set against people who want to have their rights as workers. Isn't it typical that the Tories' attitude, as it always has been, is set people against each other, divide and rule? We will do all that we can to help those people with autism and those people caring for people with autism. We have done that through previous legislation. We have done that through the funding we have put in place. We haven't cut social services spending by 6%, as he has, and his party has in London. Delayed transfers of care up in England, the disaster of the NHS in England at the moment, all caused by a lack of spending on social services. I make no apology at all for standing up for the rights of workers in Wales and their representatives, and if he doesn't like that, he can go and explain to voters in Wales why he wants people to be in a position where they no longer have the ability to exercise their democratic right to strike. He yaps away, doesn't he? He yaps away like an untrained dog in the back of the chamber there.
There's been a lot of yapping during this question and answer. From our perspective,
we will stand up for the rights of workers, even as he is indifferent to them.
11 million gets you a bill. Arweinydd Plaid Cymru.
Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood.
On December the 15th last month's December the 15th last year, figures on the performance and the value of the Welsh economy were published. Now, they haven't received a huge amount of attention, but they show that the Welsh economy now stands at 71% of the UK index, down from 71.4% in 2014. Now, we need to be closing that wealth gap and not presiding over it widening. Now, aside from the risk that we face from losing the funds currently received by deprived communities, there's also a risk to businesses and jobs from the decision to leave the European Union. It's vital from a safeguarding jobs perspective that Wales continues to participate as much as we possibly can in the single market. First Minister, do you agree with Plaid Cymru that it is in the Welsh national interest to continue to participate fully in the single market without tariffs or barriers?
Well, it's a position we've held for many, many months. The phrase we've used is full and unfettered access. Single market participation amounts to much the same thing. What we have to avoid in the next few months and years is anything that impairs the ability of businesses to export from Wales and therefore makes it more difficult for them to employ people. It's right to say that GDP needs to increase. The way to do that is to invest even more heavily in skills. As people have more skills, they're better able to attract investment that leads to better paid jobs. And that is exactly the direction that we want to move in. I am sure she will have done the same thing, of course. Listen to the Prime Minister's speech this morning. Some of it was welcome. I think the tone was better. It wasn't as aggressive as the nationalist wing of her party, Theresa May's party, tends to explain it. There were issues about recognising the rights of the devolved nations, which I welcome, although there's a contradiction in saying that the British Parliament decides the final deal without the devolved parliaments having their own view as well. Leaving the single market, I don't agree with. It's half in, half out of the customs union, needs more explanation. And, of course, how you have control over immigration with a large open border has never been explained either. So there is some clarity, not all of it welcome. Some of it is better from the Prime Minister, but there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that we have the best outcome for Wales.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. Now, Plaid Cymru would argue that Wales is now facing a made-in-London plan for withdrawing from the European Union. And I'm glad you mentioned the question of exports. On this map, the risk to Wales from a hard Brexit is illustrated very strongly, I think. The Welsh economy is the most dependent part of the UK on exports to the EU, and manufacturing economies like ours rely the most upon that market. And we're talking about industrial jobs, jobs in the food industry, in tourism, jobs that are vital to people in Wales, which cannot be put at risk. Now, we also know that much of the non-European investment into Wales has been attracted here because of our position in the single market. And another risk to this country, beyond losing our position in the single market, is that we are heading for neoliberalism, ultra-neoliberalism, based on deregulation and privatisation, based on slashing workers' rights, based on watering down environmental regulations which keep our country and our landscape clean. We face losing so many of the hard-won gains, and none of us should be prepared to put those at risk easily. First Minister, will you commit to exploring how we can avoid taking this path of economic and social vandalism? And will you champion the need for continued participation in the single market and for the highest possible standards for workers, consumers and for businesses?
Well, as I've done consistently since June. Of course, there'll be nothing to stop this Assembly from implementing EU directives if it wishes to. I mean, if that's something the Assembly wants to do, there should be no ban on doing that. It's a matter of the democratic process. One of the contradictions that was expressed by the Prime Minister was that she said that the British Parliament should have a vote on the final deal. Fine, but a lot of that will involve devolved areas. There has to be at least an LCM through this Assembly before the British Parliament can take that vote. So there are a number of issues that will need to be resolved there. I was concerned at the Chancellor's remarks on Sunday when he said the British economic model would have to change if there was a particularly hard Brexit. He mentioned lowering corporation tax. That was, I think, just one thing out of many things that he would like to do that are not to the taste of either her nor me. I don't believe in, as they would put it, deregulating the employment market. That means slashing workers' rights and slashing workers' pay. I don't believe in destroying environmental protections that have been put in place that have not just helped in terms of the environment, but have helped to promote tourism over the years. And yeah, I share with her a concern that there are some in the Conservative Party who see this as an opportunity to introduce radical right-wing thinking without any kind of restraint at all. And that is something that I know she would resist at all costs.
Yes, First Minister, and Plaid Cymru has stated that we are not prepared to sign up to a negotiation plan that has been hatched by Westminster elites if there is no regard to the devolved administrations. And we both know that it makes sense for Wales to work closely with the other devolved governments. Scotland is prioritising single market membership and their economy ahead of any other constitutional aims that they might have. But they are prepared to hold an independence referendum if their compromise options are not met by the UK government. The situation, as you are aware, in Northern Ireland is very sensitive at the moment too. Will you confirm that you will work with the Scottish Government and the next Northern Ireland Executive to ensure that the Prime Minister of the UK is deterred from pushing through a plan for more deregulation and more privatisation, which would of course be very harmful to people here in this country?
We do work with the Scottish Government. We don't clearly have the same view on the final destination, as it were, but we do work with them and talk to them with a view to forming common ground where we can. And that is sensible diplomacy. Northern Ireland was more difficult because in Northern Ireland the First Minister and Deputy First Minister had very radically different views on Brexit. And we see the situation in Northern Ireland, and part of the dynamic of the problem in Northern Ireland is Brexit. It's not the main problem at the moment, but it sits there. Look, because of the peace agreement that was put in place, and the only identity that people in Northern Ireland shared was a European one. They don't have another shared identity. So that must be managed very, very carefully. But it's hugely important that whatever the outcome of the election in Northern Ireland, that we're able to work with Northern Ireland and with Scotland to remind Whitehall that this isn't just about the Whitehall bubble, it's about all 4 nations of the UK.
Arweinydd Grŵp UKIP.
Leader of the UKIP group, Neil Hamilton.
The First Minister is trying to compete with the leader of Plaid Cymru as the sort of Jeremiah of Wales today in relation to Wales's future outside the EU. And I'm sorry to hear him say that he's against lower taxes on business, because the Irish Republic has very successfully used a lower rate of corporation tax to attract a huge number of firms into Dublin, particularly in the financial services sector. So it seems to me wholly counterproductive to Wales's interest to rule this out for the future. But last week the First Minister said in relation to the single market, I don't believe you can have access to the single market and at the same time say you want full control over immigration. Well, that's exactly what we do have with the South Korea trade agreement. Why isn't that going to be possible for us in Britain?
How can you have full control of immigration when you have a large open border with the EU?
Sorry, I missed that.
How can you have full control over immigration if you have a large open border with the EU?
Oh, well, there is, Theresa May referred to this in her speech this morning. We did have a common travel area with the Irish Republic long before either of us were members of the EU. And this is a practical question which does need to be solved, and there's no reason to think it can't be solved. But what I'm interested in, as a result
Let's allow the leader of the UKIP group to be heard, please. Please.
As a result of Theresa May's speech at lunchtime today, she has clarified a number of issues. Not all, I accept, and what the First Minister said about the Customs Union certainly needs further clarification, but she has clarified the government's position. Can the First Minister now clarify what exactly is the Labour Party's policy on managed migration from the EU?
I've explained the policy, and that is freedom of movement to work, something close to what the Norwegians have. It takes away the fears of some people that people move to a particular country in order to claim benefits. Whether that's true or not, we know the perception was there. And it is, I think, a reasonable position to take that most people in the UK would accept. Now, I mean, he is right about the situation, and it does need to be solved. Unfortunately, no one knows how to solve this. The reality is, my concern is, he's right at the common travel area, but then for the first time ever in history, there will be wholly different immigration policies on both sides of that border. Ireland, it is true, is not part of Schengen, but it will have freedom of movement. If you want to come into the UK, go into Ireland. You can get into the UK without any checks at all, without any kind of control, and that is the reality of the situation. In terms of customs, are we then to see the return of the customs posts on that border and customs posts in our Welsh ports? That issue hasn't been resolved at all, and the effect that would have on the throughput of vehicles and people through those ports. What I fear more than anything else is that somehow Northern Ireland gets a better deal in terms of customs than Wales does. That will channel traffic through Kenryan and possibly through Stranraer in the future at a cost of jobs in the Welsh ports. So whatever happens, the situation whether it's the Welsh ports or the Northern Ireland border, has to be the same in order to ensure that fairness of treatment?
Well, the First Minister is talking about all sorts of transitional points, which inevitably have to be considered. We had similar difficulties when we entered the EU 40-odd years ago. There were problems of transition. These can be dealt with. But what I'm concerned with is that the First Minister is always looking on the black side of things and imagining the worst. He did this in relation to Donald Trump in the United States. I've raised this with him several times. I've raised this with him several times, and he said that Donald Trump believes in America first. It'll never be possible to agree a free trade agreement with the United States. What is clear is that it's not going to be possible for the EU to agree a free trade agreement with the EU, but Donald Trump himself has said in the last 24 or 48 hours that he would move very quickly to make a new trade deal with the UK. I'm a big fan of the UK. We're going to work very hard to get it done, and done properly, good for both sides. Can I not persuade the First Minister to have just a glimmer of optimism for the future?
Well, I do not believe that the American government will want to have a free trade agreement with anybody that is anything other than very, very positive for the US and negative for the other party to the agreement. What Donald Trump has said, he wants to tear up the Trans-Pacific Partnership, he wants to tear up NAFTA and have an agreement with the UK. Does that mean then we will see beef full of hormones coming into the UK market and undercutting our Welsh beef farmers? Does it mean that we will see that, for example, in his party was campaigning against TTIP, saying this is a bad deal? Does it mean that if TTIP is back on the table, he will now support it? That the party will not support it? Does it mean, for example, that the UK will collapse at the knees if the US government says you must open up your public services to privatisation? Because that's what they'll press for. I have to say, I am in favour of good relations with the US. Of course I am. I'm in favour of good relations with all countries. But I am sometimes touched by the sweet naivety of the leader of UKIP and his fellow traveller, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, when they think that the world will be an easy place and the free trade agreements are easy to negotiate. They are not. The free trade agreement between the EU and Greenland took 3 years, and that was just about fish. The agreement with Canada was 7 years. Other agreements take 10 years. I've looked at the list of tariffs that are involved. There are tariffs on hats and umbrellas, for goodness sake. Agriculture is always excluded from free trade agreements, almost always. It's not there with Canada, it's not there between Norway and the EU. The agricultural tariff is nearly 50%. Welsh farmers cannot live with a tariff on Welsh lamb and Welsh beef of 50%. And anybody who thinks that they can is letting Welsh farmers down.
Question 3.
Question 3, Joyce Watson.
What is the Welsh Government doing to reduce food waste in Welsh households? Well,
food waste in Welsh households has decreased by 12% from 2009 to 2015, and we, as a government, fund the Waste and Resources Action Programme Cymru Love Food, Hate Waste consumer campaign.
You're right, First Minister, that food waste has reduced by 12%, and it has saved 105 tonnes of carbon a year over that same period. However, even with that 12% reduction, there has been 188,000 tonnes of food worth £70 million thrown away by Welsh households in 2015. And given that 50% of that food waste comes from households, it is clear that reducing the amount of waste here would have a significant financial benefit for both individuals and for the environment. And what is interesting going alongside that is that 60% of people who were questioned thought that they were not wasting any food whatsoever. So given those facts, First Minister, what do you think that the Welsh Government could do in terms of at least educating people about the food that they are wasting to the tune of £35 million a year?
Well, I can say that the Love Food Hate Waste Cascade training is available for communities and businesses. To date, RAP Cymru have trained over 3,400 people in Wales, and that helps consumers to make the most of the food that they buy. It's a start, there's more to do, but we can do more. We have already reduced the amount of food waste. in Wales. Some 24,000 tonnes has been reduced so far. We know there's more further to go, but that work is now ongoing.
Susie Davis.
Llywydd. Of course, it's not just households, it's public services as well where this needs some attention. The Waste and Resources Action Programme, WRAP, which your government funds, is now working with Abertawe Bro Morgannwg University Health Board to identify how to reduce food waste in hospitals. Now, that's one thing. But last week, ABMU confirmed that admissions to them for malnutrition were at their highest for 5 years. So WRAP and ABMU can work together with other parties to identify and share good ideas. In fact, I'm hosting one of those Love Food, Hate Waste advice sessions in Bridgend this Thursday. You may want to come. But do you think that food waste is just part of a bigger issue for government and society about nutrition and attitudes to food, which we need to take more seriously rather than fragmented responses to things like obesity and packaging, nursing care, animal health, carbon footprint and so on?
Part of the problem is, of course, that cheap food is not healthy food. And for so many people, they've seen a squeeze on their incomes since the crash of 2008, and they will quite often say, well, I'd love to eat healthier food, but the reality is I can't afford to. So the member's right. It's not just about targeting health issues. It's about ensuring that people have the skills they need to get into the jobs that they need to increase their incomes so they can eat healthier in a way that they would want to. And that's precisely the way that this government operates, looking at holistic solutions to issues rather than doing it via a compartmentalised formula.
Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Llywydd. Welsh Government support for the Tomorrow's Valley project based in Llwcoed in my constituency could see food waste providing enough power for 1,500 homes by generating over 1 megawatt of green electricity. What interim evaluation has the Welsh Government made of this project?
Well, our priority is to reduce the amount of food waste, obviously produced by households. We are working with the local authorities involved in the Tomorrow's Valley hub to provide targeted campaign support to increase the amount of food waste that is captured by local authorities for recycling. Once completed, of course, that campaign will be evaluated to determine its success by looking at the food waste recycling data.
Question 4, Heather.
Question 4, Heather David.
Will the First Minister provide an update on plans for the procurement of new rolling stock at the commencement of the new Wales and Borders rail franchise?
Well, I can say that the procurement of the contract has started, and we've made it clear that we expect to see higher quality rolling stock introduced as part of that process.
Travelling on the Rumney to Cardiff line at rush hour on the Valleys lines is a grim experience. I know that from journeys I've taken myself, and the Valleys lines generally, I'm told, are the same. Arriva have told me several times that there is simply no rolling stock available to ease the overcrowding. They told me that a new diesel train would take approximately 3 years to procure from the procurement to the receipt of the stock. That means if new diesel stock is ordered as part of the new franchise agreement, rail passengers may not see new carriages until 2021 at the earliest. What is the Welsh Government currently doing to ease the problem in the short term with regard to rolling stock? But moreover, is there any way the Welsh Government can order new rolling stock today or in the coming months so that the new operators, when they take over the franchise, may have rolling stock of sufficient quality and number to ease the overcrowding problem?
The problem we've had historically is not having control of the franchise. We still won't be able to put in place a public sector agency in order to run the franchise unless there are changes at Westminster, even though the Scots can, of course, but we won't be able to do that. The difficulty is that the current model involves operators who lease their rolling stock in the main, so when they do face capacity problems, they haven't got the stock. In the days of British Rail, the stock was there. That's the problem with the model that we have at the moment, and its weaknesses compared to the British Rail model that existed before the early 90s. But we are making it clear, as part of the procurement for the new contract, that we expect to see higher quality rolling stock. It's not going to be good enough in the future simply to say there's a limit on what we can procure, or there's a limit on the quality of the rolling stock that will be running on the Welsh Railways. We want to make sure, as the Metro rolls out, it stands amongst the best in Europe.
Di Lloyd.
Diolch, Llywydd.
Thank you, Llywydd.
To Hefin David, but concerning the Heart of Wales line from Swansea to Shrewsbury, with travellers feeling that the present contract is a long way short of being fit for purpose. Can you assure passengers that you're looking to provide more trains, faster trains and better trains as a part of the next franchise agreement?
We intend that no railway line in Wales is left behind. We want to make sure that the travel experience for people is as good on a heavily used lines as it is for the Heart of Wales line, which is an important artery for so many communities in Wales. It's said, of course, the reason why it survived is because it ran through 6 marginal constituencies, so the urban myth has it. But it's good to see it there, and it's an important part, not just of our passenger rail network, but it's an important freight diversion line as well when the main line is closed.
Russell George.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. By January 2020, rolling stock in Wales will need to comply with the new UK-wide rules on disability access. Now, as it stands now, the majority of the Wales and border rolling stock would not meet these new standards, and we've got evidence to suggest that securing new rolling stock could take, of course, up to 4 years. Are you confident that the fleet will be modernised in time for this approaching deadline?
There are expectations that we will place on those who are bidding to run the Wales and franchise contract. And as part of the expectations that we will have, we will want to make sure that they are proof not just against the law as it currently stands, but of course to ensure that they are able to comply with the law in the future.
David Rowlands.
Yeah, given that the new rolling stock is an essential demand within the franchise decision, is the First Minister in a position to specify to any interested parties whether and to what extent light rail stock will be required as opposed to standard rail stock, given the implications of the proposed metro system?
Well, these are issues that are being considered as part of the process. It's right to say that certainly in the future we will be looking at light rail in terms of providing new services. It's easier to do that than through heavy rail, and of course we're examining very carefully what the most effective way of providing rail services will be in the future. I do emphasise that whatever model is chosen for any particular line, then the terms and conditions of those working in the railway service will of course be protected.
Question 5, David Ellis.
Question 5, David Ellis-Thomas. When did the First Minister last meet with the UK Prime Minister to discuss Wales's relationship with the European Union?
Well, I met with her in October, and I spoke to her this morning prior to the speech she made this morning. She didn't tell me much about what she was going to say, apart from saying that United Kingdom would be looking outwards to the rest of the countries of the world and would maintain a relationship with the countries of Europe.
Whilst I'm pleased to hear that the First Minister has spoken to the UK Prime Minister this morning, I'm not surprised that he didn't get much light on the matters, but having understood what she said in that speech, does she understand that it wouldn't be appropriate for her as the UK Prime Minister to try and negotiate along with the rest of the European Union on devolved issues?
Well, I noted that she said there would be no change as regards devolved powers and that laws would be made in the parliaments of the United Kingdom. And she also said that she wanted to strengthen the union between the nations of the United Kingdom. I don't know exactly what that means. If that means that we will have a system where there is a mechanism of securing agreement between Wales, England, Scotland and Northern Ireland about some of the common issues between us, then I would welcome that. If that is some kind of a message to say that some things would be determined by the United Kingdom government on behalf of all of the other home nations, then I would not welcome that.
Lewis, and First Minister, no doubt you were as appalled as I was last week when Tory MPs in Westminster talked for 4 hours to talk out the bill from Melanie On MP, the private member's bill from Melanie On MP, which would have safeguarded every aspect of employment legislation currently protected under EU law once we leave the European Union. And I note that in stark contrast to the actions of her MPs last week, the Prime Minister in her statement this morning gave certain assurances on workers' rights. But does the First Minister agree with me that this demonstrates that there is a clear split in the Tory party on this critical issue of workers' rights, meaning it's going to be more difficult than ever to ensure that workers are protected in a post-Brexit Britain? And does he further agree with the TUC that we will need to know exactly what the framework for workers' rights and jobs will be?
Well, I did note what she said. I welcomed what she said. In fact, she said that not only would rights be protected, but extended in the future, which I didn't expect, but something I welcome. Undermined, of course, by the Leader of the Welsh Conservatives this afternoon, who shot a very large bullet through that argument. Now, I hope this is a sign she's prepared to face down the rabid right in her own party and to fulfil the promises that she made today, because we know there are some in the Conservative Party who take the view that the best way forward is to make the UK a model of deregulation along the lines of some countries in the world where there are no workers' rights, where people live in fear of their job security and whose quality of life is far lower than that even exists in the UK at the moment.
Steffan Lewis.
Cywydd, I was interested in the First Minister's earlier comments regarding our future relationship with the EU, in particular the implications for Welsh ports. He suggested that it would be unacceptable for Northern Ireland to have a more favourable customs arrangements than for Wales. So in that context, and in that scenario, would he be arguing against such terms for Northern Ireland, or would he seek a similar differentiated approach for Wales in order to defend our ports and our economy?
Well, I don't see customs at all between any point in the UK and any point in the Republic of Ireland. What I fear is that a deal will be done where there will be no customs posts at all on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, but yet there will be in the Welsh ports. If you were an operator, the last thing you would want is have to go through customs physically, so you will, instead of going through Holyhead, you'll go through Kenryan and into Larne and to Northern Ireland, which gives Northern Ireland a significant competitive advantage over the Welsh ports. That would represent, for me, an unfair outcome.
David Melding.
First Minister, I think a clear Brexit was always the most likely outcome, given what people voted for in the referendum. But now, what happens afterwards has to be our main focus. Do you agree with me that we should seek arrangements that are based on respect for our EU neighbours? There should be no part of wishing the EU to fail. That will cause huge problems for us directly. A strengthening of the role of the World Trade Organization. I am very concerned that American policy may turn on this issue now, whereas I think much of what people who argued for Brexit predicated their view on was that we would move to World Trade Organization rules if that was what was required. And finally, the role of NATO, we remember the very successful summit here in Newport, is a way of projecting to the world that Britain still seeks to fulfill its international obligations and to be a good neighbour.
Absolutely true. I mean, Brexit is a little like standing in a restaurant and somebody saying what they don't want from the menu, and then trying to guess what they do want without them expressing a necessary view on it. And as politicians, we've all been trying to guess what they want. There are so many different models. For me, it's always been about making sure that we preserve, protect and enhance the Welsh economy. That is utterly fundamental to my mind. And it is about being a good neighbour. Europe doesn't do disputes very well. History tells us that. We've always been far stronger when we've worked together. The European Union was the framework for peace. It was the framework for peace in Northern Ireland, for that matter. And it's hugely important that that goodwill and cooperation that's been built up over so many years since the end of the war is not lost as we seek a new relationship with the EU in the future.
Question 6, Adam Price.
Question 6, Adam Price.
First Minister state what plans he has to discuss the package of proposals Tata Steel has presented to the workforce with its interim chair, Ratan Tata.
Well, I discussed the issue with the CEO of Tata Steel UK yesterday in a meeting that I had with him, and I've today written to Kaushik Chatterjee, who is the CEO Finance of Tata, who is greatly influential on these matters, and I made it clear that it's hugely important that Tata should explain very clearly to the workforce what the implications of the changes are.
In his meeting with Bill Menrajau, was he able to outline the nature of the concerns that we have expressed in my party, but also widely shared among the workforce, about the highly uncertain nature of the commitments on investment and employment, and also the potential consequences of the proposal to de-link the British Steel pension scheme and Tata, effectively creating an orphan fund? And was he able to seek some assurances or concessions from Tata Steel in relation to these concerns?
What we do know from Tata is they are committed to at least the next 5 years to Port Talbot. If there is agreement on the pension scheme, we know they will be committed in that time to 2 blast furnaces. The money that we have made available potentially for Tata is conditional. We want to see certain guarantees put in place if that money is going to be released, as members would expect us to. But I think it's also fair to say that difficult though the decision is for the workers there, that there is nothing else on the table. The choice is accepting what's there, difficult though it might be, or great uncertainty. We're back to square one, effectively, great uncertainty. It's a difficult choice, I accept that, but that is the choice that workers face. But nevertheless, we've come a long way from where we were in March, where the situation was grim indeed, I have to say. If you'd asked me then whether the heavy end of Port Talbot would remain, the answer would probably have been no, it was unlikely. Because of the hard work that's been put in by Welsh Government officials, the hard work that's been put in by representatives such as David Rees, because of the hard work put in by Welsh Government, but by our officials, and the money that's been put on the table, we are in a position now where we can offer where Tata are able to offer an opportunity to Welsh workers that workers must now consider.
David Rees.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. It's clear I've met with the trade unions and steel workers last week again to discuss some of the issues in the steel and the challenges it faces, and the proposal was one of those issues that came up. And what was clear was the lack of confidence, as I think Adam Price has highlighted, in Tata itself at this point in time. I've passed that on myself to Mr Jar, but will you actually raise it now with the new chair of Tata & Sons, Mr Chandra Sekaran? Because it's important that a voice from the top of Tata is there to say, we support this deal, we're going to honour this deal, it is going to be on the table and we will deliver it. I think that voice from the top is important to the workers to gain that confidence they've lost in the last 12 months.
I think that's an interesting suggestion. As I say, I have made it clear to Tata that it's hugely important that they communicate as effectively as possible to the workforce what is on the table here, and their own commitments, of course. You know, I have no reason to doubt the commitments that Tata has made, but of course these things it's important to repeat in order for people to understand that those commitments are being made.
Russell George.
First Minister, you said that there's no other offer on the table, and I accept that position as well. But can I ask what initial discussions that you've had as a government with the UK government, the unions and other interested parties in developing an alternative strategy in the event that the current proposal is rejected?
The UK government is not interested and hasn't been interested since the change of Prime Minister. We are in a situation where the issue of energy-intensive industries and the prices of electricity in the UK are still an issue. It was raised with me by Tata yesterday. They are still saying that the UK is an expensive place to do business because of its energy prices. We have yet to see sufficient action from the UK government in order to support the good work that's been put in by the Welsh Government.
Question 7, Sian Gwenllian.
7, Sian Gwenllian. Will you please make a statement to provide an update on plans for Carnarvon Bournewydd bypass?
Well, we are currently reviewing the responses received to the draft orders that were published in August last year, and we will be making an announcement on the next stages shortly.
I met yesterday with the contractors for this programme, Jones Burnett and Balfour Beatty, and they were hugely concerned that no date has been announced for a public inquiry, and that in turn will lead to delay unless moves are made very shortly in that regard. The proposal has already been delayed by 12 months, as you will well know, because of arguments about bats. Now, certainly we don't want any further delay, so can you give us an assurance that the contractors can proceed with this proposal early in 2018, which is according to the current timetable?
Well, we are going through the issues that were raised in the environmental statement in August to ensure that they are all resolved as regards Welsh Government's commitment. May I tell the member that the commitment to build the bypass still exists. Although there has been delay, it wasn't possible to avoid that delay. But no, it's crucially important that the road is built as soon as possible.
Nick Ramsey.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the financial support available for new businesses in Wales?
Well, support is available to all businesses, including new businesses, through a variety of funds, including our recently introduced Repayable Fund for SMEs and the Growth and Prosperity Fund.
Thank you, First Minister. We know full well the problems that businesses in some areas of Wales are facing with the huge hikes in business rates this April. this is particularly difficult for newer businesses. While I welcome the commitment of extra support in the budget, there's still a lack of clarity over how that money is going to be distributed, and some businesses have told me that they're in limbo, particularly those who need to sign up to longer-term leases. When will the Welsh Government be publishing full details of the new funding package available to businesses, and how businesses will be able to apply for it?
That will be published soon. It was important, of course, to get the budget through the Assembly in order not to prejudge the outcome of that. And, of course, I can reiterate that a new permanent rates relief scheme for small businesses will be introduced from next year onwards.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog.
I thank the First Minister. I have